As you get older and wiser, I think you realize like you can't do it alone. It takes a village.
Welcome back to the TroopHR Podcast. I'm your host, Taylor Bradley. What does it really take to build a business and yourself at the same time? In today's episode, we sit down with Thach Nguyen, founder and CEO of Plenty Search, and for an honest conversation about the realities of entrepreneurship, leadership, and building a people-first organization, from navigating imposter syndrome and becoming an accidental CEO to leading with authenticity and resilience. Thach shares practical lessons for founders, HR leaders, and anyone working alongside high-growth teams. Whether you're supporting a startup, considering entrepreneurship yourself, or looking to build a stronger workplace culture, this conversation offers a candid insights on communication with founders, prioritizing business impact, and creating environments where people can do their best work. But as always, start out on the ground floor by asking Thach what prompted him to become a CEO.
I always say that I'm an accidental CEO because, by background, I am an immigrant. I'm gay. I am a chief people officer. Those things are normally not the characteristics of someone who, as a childhood, is like, I'm going to be a CEO one day. I never thought I'd be a CEO. However, the best decision that's ever happened to me, and I'll tell you more why in this conversation, it happened because I had been scaling and been part of hypergrowth for over a decade at that point between Airbnb, Care of, and Sword. And I just needed a break. Like I was talking to companies and I knew deep down if I went right into the next job, I wasn't going to give them my best. And so I thought this would be like a few months break and I just kind of do some side consulting gig and then, eventually go back and be a chief people officer again, presumably. But that little consulting practice kind of grew. And as an immigrant, I am incapable of saying no to work and like, no, I can do that. And so, I brought on one team member, then two, then three. And before I knew it, I think it was 6 months in, I realized, oh, Thach Nguyen Consulting LLC is not a consulting practice, it's a company. And we came up with a brand and company, Plenty Search.
Such an interesting moment that you came across there is when you realized it was a company. Walk me through what was your internal monologue when you came to that realization?
I would say that the train had left the station by then. There was no way I was going to go back. So I would be lying if I said that it was even a consideration or a debate. It was my dream job. It continues to be my dream job. This month is our 5-year anniversary. And so I still am, reflecting a lot and it's still my dream job. I think what my internal monologue was, the main thing was I thought, I give this thing 12 months. I just never saw myself as a CEO. I didn't have belief in myself. I had incredible imposter syndrome on a lot of days. I still do. And so for me, like success, I actually said this to my fiance. He said, like, what do you want out of this? I said, I just hope in 12 months I can still make payroll. Like we can pay the bills and like I have a business. And obviously it turned out much better than that. But my expectations were kept very low.
I can't imagine the different pressures that come along and how unique they are maybe to this role compared to the chief people officer role. And you said, hey, I'd never go back. What are some of the things that would make you never want to go back to be a chief people officer?
Well, it's a really hard job, number one. And I know this is a podcast for a lot of chief people officers, so I want to make sure they feel heard. It's a really fucking hard job. And now I work with a bunch of chief people officers. We hire a bunch of chief people officers. So I've got to know this role very intimately from a 360, from all the different vantage points. And it's a really hard job. I'm a people pleaser. So I don't think you can be an excellent chief people officer and be a people pleaser. That's something I'm working on, but it's still something I struggle with. And I think that the job in a lot of ways is set up for failure. There are so many examples of people succeeding in it Sue Cho from Anthos, like Sarah Marzatelli, like Cindy Gordon. There's some incredible chief people officers out there, but it's a job that requires a lot of resilience. So that's number one, the chief people officer job itself. I would say number two is I realized that I am an entrepreneur. I'm a like entrepreneur in hiding. Like I'm 37 years old. Plenty will not be my last job. I know that I have hopefully many more years ahead of me, and I've already thought about what other businesses I want to build. And sneak peek, they're not going to be HR or staffing businesses. They're going to be, like brick and mortar businesses and things that are completely outside of what I do today because I realized that my skill set is I can build amazing teams. And that is a transferable skill across a lot of industries.
Such a great call out that so much of what we do is talent strategy at the end of the day, right? And understanding that all of these businesses are human endeavors, no matter how much AI, even at an AI infrastructure company I work at the end of the
Yeah.
day, it's the humans that are really doing the work, and getting them to align can be challenging. Also, groundbreaking news as a chief people officer, I always thought you could please everyone. So I'm actually, pretty
Yeah.
pleased.
Oh man, I'm so sorry to bring it to you, Taylor. Sorry, like 22 years late.
I know. I feel like I've totally missed the wagon on
Really?
that one,
I
but
bet I bet you please everybody though. Like you're the
that's
exception.
not true. One of the questions I love talking to people I admire is, what do you know now that you wish you would have known at the start? When you started your company years later, what are
Yeah.
those things that you wish you would have known?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. So actually, this is the reason why I wanted to talk about this topic when you asked me about what I wanted to talk about. I never dreamt this for myself. I still don't. A lot of days it still feels like a dream, and it's the best thing that's ever happened to me. And so I want everyone to know that like it is not as hard as it seems. You can totally fucking do it. Whoever is listening, like whatever that business might be for you, whatever your version of entrepreneurship, you can absolutely do it. Is it hard? Yes. I like to say that this is by far the most rewarding, most meaningful, most fun. I've never learned more in so many dimensions. This job is amazing. And it is the hardest job I've ever had. I don't want to paint too overly rosy of a picture, but I believe that there's a lot of people, and I hope people listening to this right now who are like on the brink and thinking about it and be like, hey, like, could I start my own consulting firm? Could I start my own recruiting shop? Could I start my own HR shop? And it's not as hard as it seems. The second thing that I wish I'd known is that I have learned that the reason why I've been successful, and again, this is not meant to brag, it's really meant to like try to inspire other people to do this, is the strength of my relationships. When I started Plenty Search, I didn't know how many people would want to, like out of the woodworks from my career and my past, want to come and support me. And so there were the obvious people, right? Like I assumed that my previous COO from Care of and my CTO from Sword and these people I worked with very intimately and very closely recently would refer me business and support me in any way or connect me with anyone. But also like this random candidate that I spoke to back in, 2012 when I was at Google who was like, yeah, you were a great recruiter and like you made a really positive impact on me. And we have a, VP of engineering role that we want to work on. And like, I would love to work on it with you. And so it made me realize that just like my whole career and my whole life of trying to be kind and generous and helpful, keyword try, I'm not always successful. It paid itself back. So if you are thinking about starting your own thing, like that's the main thing. Like I would try to really look at yourself in the mirror because this is a really big decision, like not something to be taken lightly. Is like, what are the strengths of my relationship? Are there people who come out of the woodworks for me? And like, have I spent my career cultivating it? And if the answer to those things are no, it's not too late.
The topic that comes up a lot with chief people officers is their business partners or members of their team will come to them and say, I want your job, right? I want to be a chief people officer. And our reaction to that is fantastic, but just know heavy is the head that wears the crown. that applies to any chief level role, right? Or C-level role. When a chief people officer were to come to you and say, hey, what is your version of that for the entrepreneurs? You covered some of this. And one thing that
Yeah.
stood out to me was you worry about payroll, making payroll, right?
Hmm.
I've heard multiple CEOs say that's what keeps them up at night, even if they're not on the verge of that being a crisis. Look, what other little nugget would you give to
Yeah.
someone thinking about making that trust?
This one is obvious, but it's important. So I'll start with it. You have to feel comfortable putting yourself out there. You're on stage all the time, proverbially and literally, and you have to get over the self-consciousness. You have to get over, like, I mean, if I can just break the fourth wall and be direct for a second, this is it, right? This is a version of that. Like, I don't like talking about myself. I don't like going this thing. I don't like being self-promotional, but I do it for the business and I do it for plenty because I hope that someone listening to this will be like, all right, well, like, he sounds like a not bad guy. Like I could work with him, you know? And so like I also know friends who have started their own consulting firms because like they don't want to ask for the favor. They don't want to ask for the help. And if I can be a little controversial for a second, I know that it's hard for people to ask help, but also I think that is also a sign of immaturity because as you get older and wiser, I think you realize like you can't do it alone. It takes a village and it takes putting yourself out there. So that's my first piece of advice. And a lot of people have a really hard time asking for help. The second thing is, I think this maybe applies more to the work I do, but I think it's relevant for a lot of the folks who listen to here, is that I have really leaned into like being a business person than a people leader. I've realized that when you talk to founders, most of the time I'm pitching to founders, there is a thing that I coin like founder talk. There's a way to talk to founders that is different than talking to chief people officers, to our peers. Like they like directness. They don't like buzzwords, as I think we all know. They don't like jargon. They like curse words. That's something I'll put out there. Like that's a tactical thing. Like throw an F-bomb in there every now and then. And the reason is because that gives them the indicator that you're being real with them. You're being direct with them. You're not giving them this scripted answer. And so when you work with them, you're going to be real and direct with them. You're not going to give them a scripted solution. And I think for people starting who want to start like HR and recruiting practices where you're working with founders, I've come to view myself as a little bit of like the founder whisperer.
I've worked with 4 founders now. It is so true. Is direct. And this is good advice for just chief people officers working with their CEO and founders
Yeah.
is be direct. They do not like HR jargon. That does not resonate with them. And it's difficult to say to care about the business as much as they do, because I think that's an unfair ask. The founder, it's their baby, right? But understand the business is
Yeah.
another big key aspect of that.
I interview a lot of chief people officers, and one of my, I hope that this doesn't get out there too much and get viral, but to me, one of my scorecards is when the chief people officer candidate is talking about their role, their impact, their business, I look for the number of like business metrics that they are like, I'll never ask for it. I don't want to lead the witness. You know, tell me about your last job, tell me about your last couple jobs. And they only mention like retention and onboarding and recruiting metrics, but nothing on net revenue numbers and margins. I get very concerned.
So do founders. Great advice. And, a couple of things real quick for me to reciprocate the vulnerability that you shared before. For me, what's held me back at moments in my career is the fear of failure. And I
Mm.
imagine that's something that you have to be comfortable with as you
Oh,
become a founder, right? Is just accept that you're going to have rejection and
yeah.
failure at some point. But on the screen behind you, and of course our listeners won't be able to see this, it says be human.
Yeah.
Why have that?
My secret weapon, my special sauce is I build great teams. I am not the best marketer. I'm not the best salesperson. I'm not the best product person. I'm not the best ops person. There are way better people than me at that, but I do think I'm really good at building teams. And so we have 4 core values: be accountable, be better each day, make work fun. But my favorite one is be human because it really encapsulates the type of culture I want to build. I think that's why we've had a really strong team. We've never had regrettable attrition. The success of Plenty is because of, I think, be human. I think that's our most important value. And what that means is like when you're having a bad day, being open to just saying that. I mentioned to Taylor at the beginning of this podcast that like I am frazzled today and being human, I may not be my best self. That permission statement, I think it's really, really important, especially as AI. That's the main thing that differentiates us.
Yes, and AI, a whole other podcast that we could talk about
Yeah.
for sure.
You
Uh,
actually mentioned fear of failure, actually, right before that. And I mentioned that.
Please, yeah.
I think that I still struggle with fear of failure. I don't think it's anything that anyone ever gets over, especially if you have always sort of associated yourself as like a high performer. But when I talk about being comfortable, earlier I referenced getting over that discomfort of putting yourself out there. Like one thing about my job is that I realize all the time I'm succeeding and I'm failing publicly constantly. The public successes are self-explanatory, but we've had clients not happy with us. We've had clients fire us, right? We've been in business for 5 years with 400 clients. Like that's happened here and there. And when those failures happened, it's so much more personal than failures when I was at Sword Health or at Airbnb, right? Like when people say like this company is bad or this product is bad, in some ways they're saying Thach is bad. You're the founder of the company. And so in my mind, I feel like I am constantly naked in front of the town square. And a lot of this job is being comfortable that like all your flaws, like I talk too much sometimes. I can be impatient. I can be like this, like they're exposed for the whole world to see, but that is part of being human. And the thing I'll say about this job is that I've grown so much, not just as a leader and as an HR person, I've grown so much as a human being. Like I'm so much more comfortable in my own skin. I'm so much more comfortable failing. Therapy has become such an important part of my own practice because you have to be really like emotionally regulated to be in this job. But that's a good thing.
Self-care is incredibly important. And the fire service, when I used to be a firefighter paramedic, is we had this saying, me, us, them. You have to take care of yourself before you take care of your team. You got to take care of your team before you could take care of others. So each one of those links has to be strong, right? The final thing that we'll do as we come in for a landing here, Thach, is how can Plenty be a resource for our listeners and how can they get a hold of you?
If you are part of the TroopHR community, I do regular roundtables. Whether you are or are not part of TroopHR, please always reach out to me. Thach at Plenty Search. Don't reach out to me on LinkedIn. I get so much spam there.
I love that. I'm the same way. But Thach, thank you so much for being on today's episode.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the TroopHR Podcast. If you've liked this episode, we would encourage you to like and subscribe. If you would like to learn more about the TroopHR community, you can reach out to troophr.com. In the meantime, keep living the dream.